It's time to D&D-ize another cryptid. What's on the chopping block, Ted?
Let's go with something rare and unusual. What about the Squonk?
What the hell's a squonk? But why not? Let's see how you can use the squonk in your D&D game.
I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
I'm Nerdarchy Dave. Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds.
Now let's not cry over this crazy cryptid in this video.
All right, Ted. Like, you're the one that brought this one to the table. You wanted to D&D-ize this particular cryptid because it is kind of local to us, adjacent to the state we live in.
Adjacent. You know, we've talked for a long time that we're from New Jersey. The next state over, the one that, you know, we go to the most regularly is Pennsylvania. And, you know, while watching another YouTube video, somebody wound up talking about this squonk. Never heard of it before. It's rather a new thing, you know, for me. But I'm like, all right, this is one we could go in a completely different direction. But so what is the squonk? It is basically this slightly oversized pig that's like got a blue-gray, has like the extra wrinkly skin, and it's always morose, it's always crying, and it's got this crazy lore of, you know, being unable to be caught because if you actually get it, it just melts into a pool of liquid.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I've also seen, like, doing the research for this video, I've also seen where it's like, one of its forelegs is transparent, so it looks like it only has 3 legs, which is kind of weird.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
It's like, it may or may not have 4 legs.
Yeah, well, you know, the cryptids are always weird like that as well. It's like you said, it's the Shar-Pei version of a pig, but also it's covered in warts as well.
Right.
So it's kind of gross. It also says one of the reasons why it's always crying is because it's ashamed of itself, and so it hides from sight and is sad all the time.
I know, but along with that, like, if you get close enough to it, it can infect you with this sadness that you don't understand, but you just become sad. And I think, like, that's an ability to kind of, like, latch upon. Like, there's hunters that go out there to try and catch it, and they've tried to pick it up, they've tried to put it in a bag, and it just turns into, essentially, tears that just ooze and leak away, and eventually it'll come back. Even if you put it in a bag, you know, it'll seep through the bag and still be able to get away.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like figure out what this monster will look like in D&D, how you can use it, and also in addition to that, we're going to make a version of it over on D&D Beyond. It's only fair to mention that D&D Beyond is a sponsor of the channel, so we'll put a link in the description to D&D Beyond so you can power up your D&D game as well as to the monster we make over in the homebrew section so you can check it out.
But if you're looking for another way to help out Nerdarchy, make videos like this, as well as all the awesome content over on nerdarchy.com, why not come check us out over on Patreon and support us there?
As a special thank you, every month you'll receive 5e content for both players and DMs alike. We make magic items, we sometimes turn into print and play cards. We make drop-in encounters just for your game. We're making spells, feats, races, subclasses, you name it, we're probably making it over there. There's even a chance to game with us. We have a monthly random fan game that we invite random fans to come play with Nerdarchy over here. So with that, you will find a link in the description, plus one of these cards up here. There's a free sample download that you can go grab to check it out before you decide whether you want to support us or not.
So the Latin name, the scientific name for this is Lacrima corpus dissolvus. That's really weird. We didn't have a Latin name for the Jersey Devil, but since we had something for the squonk, we figured we would share this. So let's dive into this D&D-ized cryptid. You know, we're going to have the link to be able to check this out as a monster, you know, possibly some, you know, adventure hooks and whatnot built into the lore of the creature. So we don't have the stats yet. Do we want to start on how you would use this stat-wise, or do we want to talk about the actual adventure hooks that you'd play with? Let's
talk about the adventure hooks a little bit, because like they've really... Some of the flavor text, I guess it's not flavor text, the lore to this monster really grabbed me. And I know one of the things that you kind of said was appealing to you was the fact that, like, this might not necessarily just be a straight up combat encounter. And, you know, contagious sadness is one of the lines in the lore. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. What if it really did have contagious sadness? But not just in the sense by being around it, it made you sad. But what if it was around you, you got sad, and then when you went around other people, that made them sad? So, like, you could have, like, a whole village or town or even city that they're suffering from this like terminal melancholy, and everyone is sad, and it's affecting their lives. Like they're not productive, they're not getting things done, and you have to figure out how to solve it.
The moroseness is, ebbed and flowed over the area. And, the characters might walk in and, they might begin to feel the effects while not fully understanding. So they could be more than just that simple, oh, let's have an encounter. This could be, a kind of little mini arc of figuring out what's going on, getting to the root cause of it, and then figuring out like, okay, well, I might be able to deal with, this issue, but if you don't get to the squonk and get it to either, go away or not, not let people near it again, that situation's just going to come back.
So that's definitely one use for sure. But what are some other things that you might have it appear in your game as?
So if you're looking for something that is a little bit, smaller on the scale and more of an encounter scenario, you could just go with it as it's a somewhat social encounter, a bit of role play, exploration scenario where they see this creature. Nothing in the lore that I found is the squonk sentient and talk back to you. It just cries. But with that contagious sadness, with that, emotional transference, like you could have things where characters become restrained or even stunned in sadness and depression and unable to act and not have the other characters know exactly what's going on. So you could just have to deal with like a serious emotional weight without anything to kind of stabilize on it. Or if you're playing a very emotional game, perhaps this thing infects you with this sadness, but it brings up, the negative things that have already happened. Have you had characters that have died? Do they have things in their backstory that were traumatic? All of these things could be highlighted by this rare creature. And they might see these effects before they're even aware that the creature's really there.
Yeah, just being because I mean the squonk itself is perpetually sad because it's ashamed of its appearance, which also to me indicates some level of intelligence as well. It's self-aware. But yeah, like the idea that, the infection maybe kind of gets at root problems that are already there and exasperates them. And like you could start off with the party, kind of having these emotional role-playing scenes in around the campfire, because all of a sudden you guys, the DM, you turn to one of the players and be like, hey, what is something that makes your character really sad, and have them kind of go into it and start experiencing the emotions and whether there's a saving throw or not a saving throw, you might be like, well, your character is overwhelmed with grief over this situation. How would they handle that? Would they cry? Would they go off and brood? Would they get angry? What is their response? And then the rest of the party could react to that. And then maybe they one by one might also start experiencing some of the same stuff. And it starts coming out in the session, and only later do they figure out that there's an underlying problem. Or, when you towards the end, this like wrinkly pig thing comes waddling into your campsite crying, and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, and this is a great way to have a little bit of exposition for, the characters in the game. I know that when I write backstory, I'm not always, totally forthcoming of, oh, here is everything about my particular character. No, like there's always things that are like kind of shared when it feels apropos. And this is a moment that you can be like, okay, well, is anyone looking for an exposition? Is anyone looking to kind of share these things? And it could come out through the actual narrative of a creature that's there, not just, hey, I feel like sharing today.
Right, and if you also want to elaborate on this creature and lore, maybe, there's the old adage, misery loves company. Maybe they're attracted to places that are already filled with sadness and sad people, and, like, they show up and it can start, like, just kind of exasperating the problem. So, now this is this as a monster, what would you make it out to be?
So I would say this would be a bit of contrariness. I think it would be a rather low CR, but like a high DC on some of its saving throws, because like all it's trying to do is infect them with sadness. So if you're not looking for that to be coupled with damage, you could have that, just, okay, well, you're sad and you don't know why. but like you could do a hunt for this thing, and thus it could be used with a rather low-level party who is going after it. And you might not know anything about the creature other than, oh, you gotta go find a crying, wrinkly, blue-gray pig that may or may not have a translucent leg. Go find it, and maybe it's an annual hunt. Maybe no one has ever caught it, and they're trying to find the first. Maybe it's a quest item that's needed for insert whatever, because sadness is affecting larger areas, and this is the root cause or what have you. Once you get it, then you have to figure out how to actually capture it because of that dissolving liquid, and it'll just reappear somewhere else. You have these aspects, these separate layers of this challenge of not only finding it, but actually holding on to it once it's been found. I think those are the elements of the hunt that become cool to be figure out what kind of things might the players come up with.
Yeah, also the idea like the tears themselves might be needed for some kind of spell component or something, or maybe you need the tears in order to make an antidote for this contagious sadness that's sweeping through the village or whatever. So is this a beast? Is it a monstrosity, aberration?
Oh, okay. So that's the direction of So I think this is a monstrosity. It could be a fae. I think fae fits the most here because there's so much emotion tangled into it.
Yeah,
that's probably the direction I would go. What do you think?
So, having done a little research and trying to figure out, there are critters called the Sorrowsworn from the Shadowfell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would look at those monsters for a lot of inspiration because many of them are influenced by the bleakness of the Shadowfell.
Mm-hmm.
And so in their physical appearance as well as their characteristics. So you kind of it helps you figure out what they're feeding on. And that's the idea. There's the lonely, there's angry, they're wretched. And they feed off of different aspects. The hungry is another one. And they actually do psychic damage when you're exposed to them. So I would look and see what are they, what is their type. I'm leaning towards monstrosity. Fae is a very interesting way to go as well, because there's also been dark fae. Mm. I don't think this creature by nature is dark, and it's
right
in the way it says it's not motivated by that. Its instincts might be a little bit more base, where it's just attracted to negative emotions.
So I've thought more and more about D&D lore, and that when I create monsters I need to do more than just let's see what this is, but you can figure out where did it come from, how did it come about. So regardless of what this thing is now, is this a unique thing? Is this is there a plenty of them? Are there the squonks all over the place? And if they are, is there another version that doesn't have this emotional upheaval, and there's now a paired creature that you can kind of work with, or maybe this other creature, if something happens, this is what they turn into, or maybe it's an evolved state. So there's different layers to coming up with taking something as simple as a 2-page Wikipedia article and turning it into full-fledged D&D lore.
Well, they do say in the lore itself that they kind of just split and create new ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say how or why,
right?
But they don't breed like other animals; they just split. And it could literally be the situation where when they absorb a certain amount of sadness or negative energy, right? It pops out another one, and if they're in an area where there's a lot of that,
mm-hmm.
they'll just keep spreading. And also, it could be like a self-fulfilling prophecy as well, because as they're there, they make more things sad, so that makes more of them, and it just keeps until you're just overrun by squonks.
Sure.
And maybe as that happens, they kind of break into the town and they start eating the granary and eating the food and stuff like that, and people are just too sad to do anything about it.
I mean, just the layers of what you can do with that. I hadn't even thought of them actually consuming food, but if it's if the people of the town are already sad and they're unable to do anything to prevent the sadness, but also to prevent the squonks from taking the food that's there, that's only going to exacerbate the issue and cause more of a problem, but also create more mystery for, you know, those trying to solve it, of like, okay, well, everyone's sad and food is going missing. How do you link those things together?
Well, what if like they seek out comfort foods because it makes them feel better, and then like as they start to feel better, like maybe that lessens the spread, and the problem starts going away a little bit, but also so has all the food, and they leave, and then they come back because they're hungry again. And now they're also back to being sad because they don't have the food comforting them. So then they wreak emotional havoc on the villagers again, and then it just kind of keeps happening.
Wow, that's a crazy ride.
Yeah. So like, but like it is interesting in the sense like, oh, here's a monster where it's not physically a threat because it's going to eat you or kill you or really it's not even really looking to steal your stuff, in the traditional monster sense, but it creates these weird mysteries for your players to have to try and solve and figure out, and also possibly some really interesting role-playing scenarios as well. Maybe you make a random chart of NPCs, with random things that they're going through that makes them sad, and then the players, get bombarded by these stories as well, especially if they haven't like encountered the squonks yet, but they're encountering the sad villagers, and like they each are bringing up these things, and like they might start piecing together too, like these things that make them sad might be really old, and based on the age of the NPC, it's something that you would think they maybe have worked through by now and wouldn't be debilitated by. Like if someone's like a grandmother and their thing was that they lost someone, but as a child, right? But now they're really old. Like, why is it hitting them like this all of a sudden?
You could also go in another direction of where it's cyclical, of like, if they're going back to the NPC, well, last time they were sad because, their pet bunny died, but now it's because, they lost their favorite necklace. It's like, wait a second, I thought you were worried about the bunny. No, it's the necklace. That's what's
right. And sometimes they're like really trivial things too, which would make it even weirder. Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of ways you can go. Now we'll have to see like what we think and how we kind of develop it as a monster and fill out the stat block. But I'm really curious to see what you folks think. And in the stat block, did we nail it? Did we totally miss the mark? What's your thought? What is your favorite cryptid, or do you have one from the area that you're from? Share it down in the comments below.
While you're down there, don't forget to do all those fun things like, share, subscribe, even go ahead and click on that notification bell. You know the drill.
Quick reminder, we drop new videos Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so come on back. But you can't wait till then. No worries, we've got you covered, because this is not the first cryptid we've done. We've also done the New Jersey Devil. You can find a link to that video up here.
So until next time, stay nerdy.